There's another image bearer in this larger story that we find ourselves in. I'm talking about the feminine heart. For far too long in my story, I tried to get my strength from a woman rather than bring my strength to a woman. Hi, my name is Michael Thompson, and in this session we're going to explore what does it look like for the beloved sons with warrior hearts to love a woman. The feminine hearts live in the same story we do, and they're asking the same question we are. Do you see me, and do you love what you see? They also long to be the beloved daughters of God. And for far too long, we men have aided our enemy in the assault on the feminine heart. I want to invite you to walk with my friends and I as we explore what it looks like to love a woman, have candid conversations about our mistakes and our failures, as well as the great comeback that God has us on in loving a woman well. So now we come to an important chapter to every man, loving a woman. This is deeper water. This is uncharted water for so many of us. This was one of the areas in my life where I saw God have to do a major renovation. So many of the things that I believed growing up about what girls were for, the pornography invasion that no man's immune from, some way or another, whether they struggle with it or not. It's a part of, it seems like every man's story. Do you know a man that doesn't have a season or a struggle with pornography?
I don't think so.
So this is a huge chapter. And it's probably not fair to say all the other chapters lead up to this one because it's not the central thing. But yet, so many of us experienced in our story that the feminine heart, that the woman is the central thing. How do you, when you look back, where did you get your training on loving a woman?
Friends. Stupid friends. Uninitiated, naive, just like me.
Yeah.
Playboy.
You know, if they were answering your question of you have what it takes, like me, I was on the job training. It was mess it up and find out that way.
Oh, what a hard trial and error
Yeah.
approach, right, to loving a woman. Did you even start with that in mind, loving a woman?
No.
I can tell this is going to be a great conversation, right? I mean, whoa, just lead me off right now.
Maybe we should get some experts in here.
Oh, well, we're all married to experts, in the feminine heart, what they long for, what they want. But yeah, loving a woman wasn't on the missional part of my life. Trying to get something from one, that seemed to describe what most of us grew up with and most of us signed on for.
I think maybe we've had taste of what it would be. I think back early on to dating Christy and the first few years of our marriage. I mean, there was definitely the natural push toward, okay, what can I get from her, and how can she meet the needs that I have and the needs of us as a couple. I mean, all of those kinds of things. Being selfless, asking questions, the pursuit of her heart, because that was part of the game to a certain degree of, okay, right. I'm going to conquer the mission. The mission is to get her to love me enough to spend the rest of her life with me. And then once that was accomplished, things became a little bit more challenging from the standpoint of, am I going to continue to do that over time?
Yeah.
And it's part of the relationship of learning all of what we've talked about, being selfless, or a lot more other-centered, being freed enough to love well, all of those things. But it is challenging. And back to how we learn, I know for me, my parents were married 33 years before my dad died, and They had a good relationship, but it wasn't, so it was observation, but there wasn't this intentional training of, okay, here's how you ought to go about this. Here is what you need to understand. A lot of it was generational, I think, but there's just a big void. I mean, it's just not talked about. I mean, the few young couples that I've talked with in premarital type counseling, it's scary.
Scary.
It's very
Sad
scary.
and scary. Few men have had a model, a few. But most of us along the way, it was trial and error, it was peers, it was experimentation, exploration. How many of us made this awful mistake of trying to get our strength from her rather than bring a strength to her?
Most of us.
I don't know a man who ran a different play or was able to step in it differently. I mean, the enemy seems to really have men bound up by this, and women too. How's the enemy at work in their lives, in the feminine heart?
Protection and provision are really big for my wife, in that she needs me to be able to bring that stability to my family. And sharing a little bit of her story, her dad died when she was 12. She was an orphan of the community for the rest of her childhood. So never having that stable place and a strong man in her life to be able to provide that, her heart is, longing for that. And I've got to be very careful when I don't understand or don't have eyes to see what she needs in a moment. Take that for granted, instead of being, I need to be very intentional so that there is that stable, settled place in my household that she can settle into.
I think the need for security, is pretty universal for women. They want to know that things are going to be okay and they'll be taken care of. And then they have all the uniquenesses of their father, their family, their experiences.
How have you bumped up against that with Jenny and her story, her past?
She's the third of three girls in a family, and her dad was a very nurturing, loving man. Her mom was more of the taskmaster, and her mom was somewhat critical of the way she looked all the time and what she wore. And so, I have to be very careful answering the question, how do I look in this, or should I wear that, or, what do you think about this hairstyle or that? So, because she has a tender spot in the self-esteem area as a result of her upbringing, which I didn't realize at first, and stepped into that trap many times.
Yeah, and it's not just Jenny, is it? I mean, this is part of the enemy's plan against them, because these are some of the very things they were created for. They bear an image too, in a feminine way. They bring the nurturing. They bring a strength and a presence, beauty. They live in the same story we do, and the feminine heart longs to be the beloved like we do. And yet the enemy seems to have used us and used this system to wound them. And so even to know some of their story, to enter into who are they, what happened to them, if it's benefited us greatly to go back into our story, what do you think about going back into their story? Your wife, the woman that you promised to love. And I know there's some men that we're talking to now that maybe they're on the other side of a marriage that isn't still a marriage, or maybe there's some men that are hopeful for a marriage. What would you say to them? How would you encourage them with this loving a woman?
Before you know your wife's story, she can be an inconvenience to you when things aren't exactly the way you want. When I learned my wife's story, God broke my heart for her. I no longer see the inconvenience. I see a beauty that needs to be rescued. I see the tender heart whose heart was broken when her dad died, or when her mom abused her, or when she had to move from a different home. You don't look at that woman the same when you know those things about what they've been through and the things they've had to face.
Yeah, I think that's critical in understanding the depth of her story. I think that's very important. And the only way to do that is to ask. I mean, you have to ask the questions, and you have to dig a little bit deeper with not a critical eye, but a
Curious.
investigative, curious eye, just to really seek to understand and empathize where you can, see the differences, understand what speaks love to them. I mean, it's very important.
Jay, you took this to really a really significant level of asking questions. You know, you started to really even record and keep a bit of a journal in terms of Christy's response. How's that helped? What did you discover in asking questions, and what kind of questions did you ask, like Blake said, in order to know her story, in order to enter in?
Well, I think it was, I don't know now, maybe 10, 12, 13 years ago. I mean, we were busy with 3 kids at that time. Now we have 4. And life was just passing us by. And so we were busy with activities, lots of good things, great things. But there wasn't a whole lot of time just for us. So we needed a little bit of a rekindling. And for me, I wanted to turn up the pursuit knob a little bit. So I started asking questions, and I just started asking simple to more complex, and I began to write those things down. And the more questions I asked, the more rejuvenated it felt like our relationship was becoming. So I just thought of every possible question I could ask her. And one that comes to mind, and I've shared this at some of our weekend events, but the question was, what was her favorite toy growing up? And I put this little journal together, and I wasn't interviewing her. I was just asking her questions and then recording it to the side, and hoping that she would feel the weight of that pursuit. But I remember coming home from work that day, and I said, well, all right, I've got to get this question answered. You know, what was her favorite toy? So my daughter was playing with some of her dolls and things when I came home, and I said, this is my chance. You know, I just asked this question. When you were a little girl, what did you enjoy doing? Jenna seems to enjoy playing with her Barbie dolls. What did you enjoy doing? And she said, I used to love to sit by the table on the floor in the kitchen while my mom was cooking, and I would play jacks. And yes, I had this mental image of the woman that I love as a little girl sitting on the floor playing jacks. And I thought, okay, that's good information. So I jump on the internet and I order the old metal jacks in a little tin box with the little rubber ball, and I wrap them up a couple of weeks when I got them in the mail, and just gave that to her as a gift. And she just lit up.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the other day we pulled those out, and Jordan, our youngest now, we were teaching her how to play jacks. So Christy, me, and her were sitting on the floor playing jacks, and Christy just waxed us all. You know, she could still get all 10.
She's still the jack champion.
She could still get all 10. But, you know, just little things. And then it went to deeper questions. What was her best day, worst day? Who has had the most influence in her life, for good or for bad? And just that journey of discovery. And it's not a one and done thing.
Yeah.
Because she's a different person. We've been married almost 27 years. So both of us are different now than we were 27 years ago. So there's this journey that she's been on. There's a journey that I've been on. A lot of that we've experienced together, but some that we've experienced by ourselves, really in silence, in the busyness of life. So unless the conversation begins to take place, unless questions are being asked, then I don't know what's on her heart.
Yeah.
I can observe and try to figure her out, but I just need to ask. We need to have those conversations, and that takes time. I mean, and we're a little bit at that place now. As a matter of fact, last night we were talking about it, how, we need that intentional time just to sit and be together. Yeah. But we have to fight for it.
I mentioned that my wife's dad was a loving man. He was the relationship guy in their family, and very different from me. He was more of a scientist. He didn't like sports. He didn't drink. He was, really a good guy. And before I knew Christ, I didn't like him that much. I mean, we weren't similar. I couldn't connect with him. But how naive am I? I didn't realize that my wife was expecting a husband like that. She would think that all men were like her dad. Now, I never put those two together. And so when she and I started having problems, I would be more bold and more forceful and more directive and controlling. And of course, that's the opposite of what she needed and wanted. But I just didn't link it. I didn't see it, how important that is.
Oh, this is a huge exploration of how we have wounded our wives, how we've contributed to the wounding of the enemy of our wives' heart. And then there's how have we gone after her heart. I hear your story, and I remember moments where honestly there were strings attached. I might have given her a great gift like that, but I had a side a hopefulness or an expectation that, because this is what I learned from the junior high and high school theologies that was coming at boys, that you do this for them and then they'll do that for you. So to get out from under all that that craziness, even in a marriage, right? Where's it go when you walk down the aisle and say, I do? You bring all that luggage with you. And now it can really get in the way. Giving her flowers or celebrating a birthday or having a great moment. And then what does the enemy whisper? You know why you're doing that. So these are the challenges that we've all faced in loving a woman. There's a passage that gets brought up often in this conversation, especially around Valentine's Day from the pulpit or at marriage conferences, right? Ephesians 5. Yeah. What does it say? You remember?
Love your wife the way Christ loved the church.
Yeah, it says basically that. And gave himself up for her. Men, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. How does that verse land in a disoriented man's heart? In a man who doesn't know who he is, doesn't know where he is, and doesn't know the good that God's up to in his life, but yet he's sitting there in church or at the marriage conference and he's being commissioned to love her as Christ loved the church. Jesus knew who he was, beloved son, knew where he was in the midst of a fallen conflict between these two kingdoms, the Prince of Peace versus the Prince of Darkness. And he knew the good that God was up to in his life. That's what loving her as Christ loved the church. He knew he was settled so he could give himself up for her. But we're commissioning men and it doesn't work. And we're surprised.
It's probably going to feel overwhelming. And then I may even revert back to the verse before it where it says, wives, submit to your husband, and stake my claim on that. Well, if she would just, then it might be easier.
Back to the deal.
You're right.
If she does her part, then I'll do mine. If I do my part, she better do hers.
And I think most men wash a lot of dishes and wash a lot of clothes and think, okay, I'm serving, so I'm loving my wife. And the wife is sitting over, I can see her now, in the kitchen or in the laundry room, just with her arms folded, just thinking,
he doesn't get it.
He has no idea.
Yeah.
The Lord came to me with that. I was in a really great season of really digging deep into the Word about some exciting things. And then one day, God brings me to Ephesians 5:25. Not the sexiest passage in the Bible for a warrior to want to go after. But the Lord says to me, the more you learn to love your wife, the more you will experience my love. So that just gave me a whole new set of eyes to go after my wife's heart. And I tell you, I've gotten dividends out of taking that seriously just in this season. As my kids are now in preschool 3 mornings a week, to be able to have time instead of just running out the door to go do what I want, but to say, these 2 hours are for us. To sit on the porch, to be with her, to listen, to pray together, to read. When we get on this journey, the temptation was going to be to run out ahead of your wife, who maybe isn't on that journey yet. And then what's the enemy doing? He's bringing that isolation into your marriage. And that absolutely happened to us. But we're getting regained ground as I take the Lord up on that offer to just really love her and be in her story the way that he's doing for me.
We often think that the battles and the mission is out there away from our home front. Where's the first battle and where's the first mission?
Right there.
And then how are we expecting our wife and kids to embrace and trust God, to love them well, when we're out serving Him and not loving well on the home front?
My wife has said to me in those seasons where I've been out running away into ministry, you love everybody first, in our family last. Man, that was convicting.
Yeah. That's when you've realized you stepped across a line.
I went too far. I went without her. Mm-hmm. Left my first post as prophet, priest, and king of my home.
Yeah.
And left that void there that they needed me to be there to bring that stability and strength.
That's a hard lesson, but it's a really good lesson. What's one thing that you can think of that God's shown you, taught you, that's now part of your way?
Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. What's
Okay,
that,
say that
James?
again. Let me write
James
that down.
1:19.
Yeah, James 1:19.
James 1:19.
Say it again.
Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And just a heart that's postured toward understanding. I love that verse in Peter where he says, it's love your wife in an understanding way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big win if we take the time to do that. And I think the reason we rush off to love other people and to serve other people rather than those closest to us is it's so much easier.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can be in,
get to
you can be out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
Check
I
it off.
guess it's like a grandparent, right? You
Yeah.
can love them, give them back to change the diaper. I mean, we've got to be there.
Yeah.
And the real us is in the nitty gritty of everyday life, lived out in front of our family.
Yeah.
And let's not neglect what we always come back to, and that is walk with God. The
Yeah.
closer the man gets to God and the woman gets to God, the closer they get to each other.
Yeah.
Walk with
That's
God
a huge
together.
one. Jim stole mine. I'll have to think
Yeah.
of another one. But the greatest thing we can do for her is walk with God, grow in intimacy with God. Not get religious on her and tell her,
Sure.
just stay the course. I mean, that's a huge one, Jim.
And the degree that we do that, and it goes back to what you mentioned early in this session, was the security that they long for. I know for Christy over the years, she experiences great security when she experiences the weight of my walk with God. I mean,
Yeah.
it gives her comfort and confidence and trust. And it's the same for me with her.
Yeah.
When I see her flourishing in her walk with God,
Right.
because I know the stability of our future is set.
Yep. One of the places I would encourage, advise another man is this is such a significant relationship. Two people walking with God together. It's violently opposed. And I've made a lot of mistakes in that relationship of Robin and me. And so one of the advice, encouragement I'd give to another man is when you see the error of your ways, when you see these things that are at work in you that aren't of Christ and Christ's kingdom, confess and repent. What an invitation to get that out of me. The old system that I learned, I mean, when I saw that what was operating in me was a consumerism, a trying to get from Robin, and that she's in my life to show me that I'm a man rather than she's in my life to teach me how to love. That was a great moment of an invitation where God said, you can lay that down. But seeing it, confessing it, turning from it and saying, but I don't know how to do anything different. And that was a great moment when God began to say, I know, I'm going to show you, I'm going to teach you this way, as Christ loved the church. So I would say repentance and confession, seeing it and then turning from it, that was a huge part in my marriage. I didn't have to involve Robin in all that either, by the way. This was me and God and part of our training in loving a woman. What would be your encouragement, Blake, your advice before we wrap up?
Walk with God together.
Include her. How have you seen that happen in your... Because some wives might be resistant to that. You know, you come in announcing, hey, I got a program, we're going to... Right? That's the religious way.
It will take time, and it won't happen as quickly as you want it to. But just walk, be that stable presence, be that encouraging presence. Allow her to have her journey, knowing that eventually God's goal for your marriage is to get you guys together.
Walking with Him.
Yeah, walking with Him together. It may take time, but He will get you together.
The last one I want to mention that we put in the book is I would encourage any man to accept her invitations. Engage in what she's doing. Go to the grocery store, enter into, if she likes musicals. I mean, I have discovered a whole other world as I've entered into Robin's world, and I have 3 daughters. And so to enter into their world, their feminine hearts, you know, this is very, very helpful. Accepting her invitation, treat it like an exploration, understanding. How can you understand somebody if you don't step into their world? So loving a woman is going to take a lot of a man. And this is, again, an invitation to go to God for the strength, the courage, and the ability to step in, fight for her heart, listen to her story, accept her invitation, walk with God, guard your heart. All of those things become part of this. But it goes back to, what do you have to do with your heart first? Beloved son, then you have what it takes to step in and fight for the heart of a good woman. A man and a woman were made for each other. There might not be a greater force on this earth than a man and a woman walking with God together, and it's devastating when they don't. Going after the heart of a woman is going to take everything you've got, but you can do this. She's waiting for you.